1890 photo found and experts notice something impossible in the background. The Philadelphia summer heat pushed hard against the windows of the old Chestnut Hill mansion as estate liquidator Michael Torres climbed his way into the third-floor attic. The Peyton family had hired him to list and evaluate everything inside their ancestral home before putting it up for sale. 5 generations of possessions were crammed into trunks, crates, and forgotten corners of one of the city's oldest surviving Victorian houses. Michael had spent 15 years working estate sales, long enough that very little truly shocked him anymore. But when he opened a cedar chest hidden beneath the sloped roof, wrapped in layers of yellowed muslin cloth, he discovered something that made him stop cold. Inside was a stack of photographs in surprisingly fine condition, carefully protected from light and damp by thoughtful storage. The images showed the Peyton family from the 1880s through the early 1900s. Formal portraits, holiday scenes, children standing stiffly in their Sunday clothes. Most of them were ordinary for the time. Serious faces, detailed outfits, the rigid poses required by long exposure photography. But one photograph made Michael freeze. It was a family portrait, larger than the rest, mounted on thick cardboard. The picture showed what looked like a wealthy family seated in their parlor. A dignified man in his early 50s, a woman of similar age sitting beside him, and 2 young girls, maybe 8 and 10 years old, standing between them. The room was richly decorated, heavy curtains, patterned wallpaper, and a marble fireplace visible on one side. What caught Michael's eye was something behind them, seen through the parlor window, a woman's face, partly hidden by a lace curtain but clearly there. Her face was pressed close to the glass. She was not looking at the camera, she was staring at the children. Michael took out his magnifying loupe and studied the image more closely. The woman in the window appeared to be in her 30s. Her face was thin, her expression filled with longing and pain so strong it showed even through the blur of the curtain. One hand was pressed flat against the glass, fingers spread as if she were trying to reach through it. Michael turned the photograph over. Written on the back in faded brown ink were the words, Peyton family. November 1890. Jonathan, Evelyn, Margaret, and Alice. 4 names for the people inside the room. No mention at all of the woman outside. Victorian photographers were very careful about what appeared in their images. They would never allow a stranger in the background, especially someone so disturbing, unless the photographer never noticed her, or unless her presence recorded something the family wanted hidden but could not fully erase. At the bottom of the chest, beneath the photographs, Michael found a small leather-bound journal. Its pages were brittle with age, filled with tight handwriting that would need strong light to read. That evening, Michael sat in his home office with the photograph displayed on his computer screen while he carefully worked through the journal. The writing was hard to read, 19th-century script, faded ink, private shorthand, but as he slowly decoded it, an unsettling story began to form. The journal belonged to Evelyn Peyton, the woman seated in the portrait, and covered the years from 1888 to 1895. Most entries were ordinary, social visits, household duties, lessons for the children. But scattered among them were strange references, written vaguely, as if meant to hide something. One entry from March 1889 said, "Jay brought them home today. Such lovely girls, so confused and frightened. Margaret cried for her mama all evening. I gave her my mother's locket to soothe her." Another entry from June 1889 read, "The matter is settled legally now. Dr. Harrison provided all the proper papers. No one will question the arrangement." Then in October 1890, Evelyn wrote, "She was there again today, standing across the street watching the house. The same woman who has appeared 3 times this month. Our housemaid says she asks questions at the market about the children, their names and their ages. Jay has contacted the police." Michael's grip tightened on the journal. The entry from November 1890, the same month as the photograph, revealed even more. "Today we sat for the family portrait. In the middle of the exposure, I saw movement beyond the window. Her again, that dreadful woman pressed against the glass, staring at Margaret and Alice with such pain. I could not move without ruining the image." When the photographer finished, she was gone. He never said he saw her, and I cannot bring myself to ask if she appeared in the photograph. Michael leaned back, his thoughts racing. The woman in the window was not a coincidence. She was someone connected to the girls, Margaret and Alice, who had been brought into the household and secured through legal papers signed by a Dr. Harrison. As Michael continued reading, the woman appeared again and again, always watching from a distance. In 1892, Evelyn wrote, "It has been months since we last saw her." Jay says the police finally forced her to leave Philadelphia. The final mention came in 1894. Margaret asked me today about her earliest memories. She says she sometimes dreams of another house, another woman singing to her. I told her it was only a child's imagination, but her eyes were so certain. Michael closed the journal and turned back to the photograph. He zoomed in on the woman's face, sharpening the image. Even through the blur, the resemblance was clear. The woman in the window looked like the girls. This was not simple adoption. This was evidence of something far darker. Children taken from their mother through legal lies, while their real mother stood outside, desperate for even a glimpse of them. Michael began researching at the Philadelphia City Archives, requesting birth records, census data, and court files related to the Petton family. The current Petton descendants had little interest in the past. They just wanted the house cleared and sold. The 1890 census listed Jonathan Petton, age 52, attorney, Evelyn Petton, age 48, and 2 daughters, Margaret, age 8, and Alice, age 6. There was no note of adoption. Both girls were listed simply as daughters. The 1880 census told a different story. Jonathan and Evelyn Petton lived at the same address, but no children were listed. Married since 1875, they had been childless for at least 15 years. Then suddenly, in 1889 or early 1890, 2 young daughters appeared, old enough to remember another life. Michael searched for adoption or guardianship records. He found one document dated February 1889 from the Orphans' Court. It was a petition for legal guardianship of 2 minor children, Margaret and Alice Sullivan, ages 7 and 5. Parents deceased, no living relatives. The petition was approved on February 28, 1889, supported by documentation from Dr. Edmund Harrison, who claimed the children were orphans. Their original surname was Sullivan, not Petton. Michael searched for death records. Thomas Sullivan had died in November 1888 from consumption, but there was no death record for the children's mother. After digging through asylum and hospital records, Michael found the truth. Catherine Sullivan had been admitted to the Philadelphia Almshouse and Hospital for the Insane in December 1888. Reason: severe grief and hysteria after her husband's death, declared mentally incompetent by Dr. Edmund Harrison. The same doctor. Catherine had not died. She had been locked away, her children taken, declared legally gone while she was still alive. The asylum's own doctors wrote that she showed no true mental illness, only grief and desperation. One doctor even recommended her release. But Dr. Harrison had filed papers declaring her permanently incompetent at the exact time the Pettons gained custody of her children. Michael uncovered more. Dr. Harrison was not just the family physician. He was Jonathan Petton's close friend. They shared clubs, church, and professional favors. The scheme was clear. Catherine tried to escape. She wrote letters begging for her daughters. All were blocked. When she was briefly released, she began appearing outside the Petton house. That was when the photograph was taken. In 1892, she was locked away again, labeled a throw, eat to a prominent family. No release followed. Michael traced the family lines forward. Margaret and Alice lived full lives under the Petton name, leaving children and grandchildren who still live today. Catherine's brother Patrick had died in a factory fire. Catherine herself vanished into the asylum system. The truth had been hidden for more than 130 years, but the photograph had preserved it. A mother's face in the window, watching her stolen children, silently accusing everyone who tried to erase her. Catherine Sullivan remained confined at Blockley until her death in 1921. At the age of 65, she had spent 33 years locked inside the same institution where she had first been committed under false claims. Her death certificate listed no relatives or next of kin. She was buried in the asylum's potter's field, placed in an unmarked grave among hundreds of others whose names were lost to time. Yet the institutional files held one final detail that gave Michael a sense of hope. Listed among Catherine's personal belongings at the time of her death was a small bundle of letters and photographs that she had somehow protected through decades of confinement. The inventory noted that these items had been transferred to the Asylum archives. Michael immediately contacted the Historical Archives of Philadelphia General Hospital to ask whether any patient belongings from that period still existed. 3 weeks later, he received an email, a sealed box labeled Sullivan. N. Catherine. Patient effects, 1921, had been located in a storage vault and had never been opened since it was archived. Michael stood in the hospital's basement archives wearing white cotton gloves as the archivist carefully opened the box that had remained untouched for more than a century. Inside were the broken pieces of Catherine Sullivan's life, the things she had held onto through 33 years of forced confinement. There were 3 photographs, their edges worn thin from being handled again and again. The first showed a young couple on their wedding day, Catherine and Thomas Sullivan in 1880, both barely in their 20s. The second showed the couple with 2 small children, likely taken around 1885. The third photograph was torn and stained by water, but it showed the 2 girls slightly older, seated stiffly in a photography studio. Michael felt his throat tighten as he realized Catherine had carried these images through everything. Through her commitment, her attempts to escape, her punishment, and her recommitment. Through 33 long years. These photographs had been her proof that Margaret and Alice were real, that they were hers. The letters revealed even more pain. There were dozens of them, written on whatever paper she could find, asylum stationery, torn scraps, the backs of official forms. Most were addressed to her daughters, but none had ever been mailed. The earliest letter was dated February 1889. My dearest Margaret and Alice, they have taken me away from you, but I promise I will come back. I am not sick, no matter what they say. I am your mama, and I love you, and I will find you as soon as they let me leave this place. Another letter from 1890 read, I saw you today. You were in a big house with lovely dresses and ribbons in your hair. You looked safe and healthy, and I thank God for that, even though my heart breaks that I could only watch you through a window. Do you remember me? Do you remember the songs I used to sing to you? The letters continued year after year, marking Catherine's grief as her daughters grew up without her. From 1895, Margaret, you must be 13 now, nearly a young lady. Alice, you are 11. I wonder if you ever think of me, or if they have told you I am dead. From 1900, I heard that Margaret Piton was married. You are a bride now, beginning your own family. I pray you will be happy. I pray your children are never taken from you as you were taken from me. Later letters showed Catherine slowly accepting that she would never see her daughters again, but also her determination that the truth should survive. In 1910 she wrote, I write this knowing you will likely never read it, but I write anyway so that someday, somehow, someone may know what happened. Your father was Thomas Sullivan. I am Catherine Sullivan. We loved you both more than life itself. The final letter was dated 1920. I am 64 years old now, and I know I will die in this place, but I want you to know, my daughters, that I loved you every day of my life. You were taken from me, but you were never forgotten. You were always my daughters. If there is justice in this world or the next, someday you will know the truth. Michael carefully photographed each letter, his eyes blurred with tears. He spent the next 2 weeks preparing his presentation, gathering every document he had uncovered. The asylum records, court petitions, death certificates, Evelyn Peaton's journal entries, and most of all, Catherine Sullivan's letters and photographs. He created a clear timeline showing how Jonathan Peaton and Dr. Harrison had worked together to take 2 children from their mother. Then he contacted the Peaton descendants who had hired him, focusing on Sarah Whitfield, the great-granddaughter of Margaret, and Thomas Thornton, the great-grandson of Alice. They met in Sarah's home in Binmar. Sarah was in her 60s, a retired teacher, warm and curious. Thomas, about the same age, was a physician, more reserved but clearly attentive. Michael began by showing them the 1890 family photograph and pointing to the figure in the window. He asked if either of them had ever heard stories about the woman. Both shook their heads. Sarah studied the image closely and asked, "Who is she?" "Her name was Catherine Sullivan," Michael said quietly. "She was your great-great-grandmother. She was Margaret and Alice's real mother. The silence that followed was heavy. Michael watched disbelief spread across their faces as he calmly explained everything he had found. He showed them the guardianship petition claiming both Sullivan parents were dead. Then the asylum admission record proving Catherine was alive. He showed Dr. Harrison's declaration of incompetence and the asylum doctor's notes that disagreed. He showed Evelyn Peaton's journal entries, her guilt, her fear of the woman who kept returning. Finally, he showed them Catherine's letters and photographs. Sarah was crying before he finished. Thomas sat still, his expression breaking. "They stole them," Sarah whispered. "Margaret and Alice were stolen." Thomas spoke quietly, his voice rough. "My great-grandmother Alice, I knew her when I was a child. She was kind, gentle, but always a little sad. I never understood why." He looked at the photograph. She was 4 years old when they took her. Did she remember? Michael showed them Evelyn's journal entry from 1894 about Margaret dreaming of another woman singing to her. "They remembered," Michael said softly. "At least in pieces." Sarah looked again at Catherine's face in the window. "She came to see them," she said, even knowing she couldn't touch them. Thomas walked to the window and stood there for a moment. "What do we do with this?" he asked. "There's Catherine," Sarah said. "She died alone in an unmarked grave. We can give her recognition now. We can tell her story." Together they decided to make the story public. With Michael's help, they prepared an article for the Philadelphia Inquirer's historical section. The paper embraced the story. The article ran on a Sunday in October, covering 2 full pages. The 1890 Patton portrait was shown with Catherine's face in the window enlarged. Catherine's wedding photo was printed alongside the studio portrait of young Margaret and Alice. Excerpts from Catherine's letters appeared next to Evelyn Patton's journal entries. The headline read, "The Woman in the Window, How a Prominent Philadelphia Family Stole 2 Children and Hid the Truth for 130 Years. The response was immediate. The article spread widely online. Local news stations reported on it. The Philadelphia Bar Association issued a statement condemning Jonathan Patton's actions and acknowledging the legal system's role. Doctors discussed Dr. Harrison's abuse of medical authority. Historians contacted Michael with information about many similar cases. Women institutionalized under weak diagnoses, their children taken and placed with wealthier families. 3 weeks later, Michael received an email that made his hands shake. It was from Kathleen Murphy in Boston. She explained that her grandmother had been Ellen Sullivan, widow of Patrick Sullivan, Catherine's brother. "My grandmother spoke sometimes about Catherine," she wrote. "She said Catherine was locked away and her children were taken. When I saw the article, I knew it was her. Catherine was my great-great-aunt." Michael connected Kathleen with Sarah and Thomas. Together, they planned a memorial to finally honor Catherine's life. The research continued. Michael found records showing Dr. Harrison had done the same thing in at least 6 other cases. Jonathan Peaton had handled legal work in several of them. It had been a system, not a single crime. The Pennsylvania Historical Society requested the materials for a permanent exhibit. Catherine's story became central to a broader history of institutional abuse. Records showed Catherine had been buried at Blockley Cemetery, but no exact grave was marked. The land had partly been built over decades later. Still, Sarah was determined. With historians and archaeologists, they narrowed the burial area to a small section. That was enough. A memorial marker was placed there. It read, "In memory of Catherine Sullivan, 1856 to 1921, and all those buried here, who died far from their families, their stories untold." Beneath it were words describing her wrongful confinement and the theft of her daughters. The dedication took place on a clear November day, nearly 133 years after her commitment. More than 100 people attended. Months later, Michael stood in the museum exhibit. 2 versions of the photograph hung side by side. One cropped, showing only the Peton family. The other uncropped, showing Catherine's face in the window. Beside it hung a photo of Catherine holding her daughters years earlier. Visitors stood silently, understanding the story without words. What once seemed impossible now felt deeply human. A mother's love, captured by accident, preserved against every attempt to erase it. The photograph had waited 133 years to speak, and now, at last, Catherine Sullivan's voice was heard, I loved you. I never stopped loving you. I was always your mother. And finally, her descendants could answer. We know. We remember.